Welcome to our broadcast, Optimizing Your Cyber Insurance Position with MDR, sponsored by Sophos. I'm your host, Kenna Johnson from the Channel Company. Today we're going to learn about the critical role of frontline cyber defense when adopting cyber insurance and how Sophos MDR can help organizations optimize their protection. To discuss this further, I'm joined by Sally Adam and Chris Wayman from Sophos. So glad to have you both here with me today.
Thank you.
Let's start with segment 1, cyber insurance adoption. According to your research, why are many organizations adopting cyber insurance, Sally?
Cyber insurance is now pretty commonplace in North America. In fact, 96% of mid-sized organizations in our research have some form of coverage. Some of them have got a standalone policy. Some of them have got cyber insurance as one of those tick boxes on their wider business policy. As to why they're having standalone cyber insurance coverage, there's some really interesting research that's come from Advisor and Partner Re, actually. And they looked into what are the top drivers for people taking out coverage. Now, at the top of the list was news of a cyber incident affecting others, which is not really surprising. But there are a few things that really stood out. Firstly, it's the supply chain angle. Increasingly, customers are saying, hey, you need to have cyber coverage for us to be able to buy from you. And this is affecting all sorts of businesses, from companies that supply supermarket chains to legal firms who provide expert counsel, that sort of thing. And this is really being backed up by what our MSPs are saying to us. It's their customers' customers who are driving that insurance purchase. And then the second really interesting thing that stood out from that Advise and Partner research was around the board or senior management demand. That's increasingly a big driver for cyber insurance purchases.
Chris, how do we talk about cyber insurance as an MSP, and how does it fit into the story?
I think really why this matters in the partner community at large is your customers are thinking about it. And oftentimes you as a partner have more knowledge about infrastructure and overall environment than anybody at the organization does, especially as an MSP where oftentimes you're leaned on for technical controls and things. So I think it's more about a holistic risk reduction conversation than it is about point products. You can get really stuck into thinking about I need my organizations that I manage or I'm a partner of to have MFA or to have, EDR or specific things. And when you look at cyber insurance, a lot of those things are part of the controls that carriers want to see to underwrite a policy. But I think as a partner, it's like a lot of things that we talk about. If you're not talking about some of this insurance stuff to your customers, somebody else maybe. So some of it is very much like making sure you're in having strategic conversations about business goals and non-product conversations and kind of general risk reduction things with the business. And I think the other side is that you are oftentimes as the partner trusted to have these conversations. There's this need to drive and kind of guide these conversations because the reality is questionnaires and things, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but questionnaires and things are lengthy and complicated, and there's a lot of stuff that you have to know. So you as a partner are in a unique position to really help the businesses that you serve get a holistic, a robust risk reduction strategy in place.
Sally, tell us about the benefits of cyber insurance coverage.
There's actually quite a few. Firstly, it enables you to access those customers who require cyber insurance as a condition of being a supplier. So that's a key benefit. But also, of course, it gives you peace of mind, just as like when you have travel insurance, when you go on holiday, enables you to get back and, enjoy focusing on what you're doing with your business rather than worrying about cyber risk. But there's some good news for anyone who has invested in cyber insurance. Those policies invariably deliver if the worst happens and you fall victim to a cyber attack. In our State of Ransomware study, 98% of respondents who said they were hit by ransomware and they were covered for ransomware, so the insurer paid out. So that's great. Plus, your propensity to be able to recover data that's encrypted in an attack, that goes up if you've got cyber insurance coverage as well. So there's a number of benefits to having that cyber insurance as part of the holistic risk reduction strategy Chris was talking about.
Let's move to segment 2, the impact of cyber defenses on cyber insurance. Sally, what's the relationship between cyber defenses and insurability?
Insurability is all about risk. When you take out a policy, what you're really doing is you're transferring risk. You're transferring the risk that you're going to have to cover the cost of an incident to your insurance partner. And insurers, they look for less risky clients because they're the ones who are less likely to make an insurance claim. Chris, you have some thoughts here, I think.
Yeah, Sally and I were talking about this, and I recently learned that there are things that we do in insurance in America that, my Canadian and British counterparts maybe don't have. But if you think about when you go to get a policy for something like car insurance here, last time I did it, I think there was an app that, my carrier asked me to open, and it asked for services to be able to monitor how I drive and like the riskiness, to quantify how risky I am as a driver. And somebody somewhere has decided that if I brake too hard and I have too many hard braking events, or I accelerate too hard, or I'm speeding, right? Those things negatively impact the discount that I might get for participating in some of these, monitoring type services that a carrier has. So for me, that's a really great analogy to some of what the carriers are trying to do now. Sally said that carriers are all about quantifying risk. And if you look at historically some of the way that that's been done, they kind of have just asked more and more questions. They've asked things that seemingly sometimes don't actually quantify the risk of an organization, but somebody thought that it was a good question to ask. So we see a shift from some carriers to being more proactive, to monitoring, much like that car insurance carrier. They're monitoring the health or the policy or the configuration of your defenses, of your stack, so that they can quantify risk much more accurately. So it's really interesting. You can look at things, especially when we start talking to customers. Insurance, cyber insurance especially, can be a little black boxy, can be a little bit anxiety producing. So I find that likening it to other points that our customers may have experienced, like in my home insurance, if I've got a security system, maybe my policy gets like a 5% reduction, or I get a better limit on things when I need to make a claim. Those are all very good examples of what the cyber insurance industry is trying to do by not just saying a blanket, do you have MFA, or do you have an EDR or an endpoint protection solution, but actually hooking into it and saying, okay, what's your configuration? What's the overall health? How is your posture? How do we quantify you as a risky customer based on your day-to-day use of the security tools that you've got in place? So I think it's a really interesting thing that we're seeing from more and more carriers, is just to try and do better about giving us more quantifiable risk metrics than just asking more questions and questionnaires. And Sally, I think that kind of plays out in the insurance research, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just like, things you can do to reduce your risk of making a claim on your home insurance, they're going to play out in your policy offers, in the premiums you pay. It's the same with cyber insurance. There's things you can do to improve your defenses, make yourself less risky, and that's going to help you access more policies, get better prices. And Chris, as you said, it really played out in the research we conducted. I mean, last year we surveyed 478 IT and cybersecurity leaders in North America, and 96% of them said the quality of their defenses really did have an impact on their insurability. For some, it was around getting a policy in the first place. For others, it was around the price of that policy. And for others, it was around the terms, the deductible, what the total coverage limit was. So yeah, absolutely. There's a really close link between those defenses and the insurance that you'll be able to access.
Great analogies to help us understand this topic. Chris, we'll go to you for this one. What does this mean for customers and partners at the front line?
What I've seen talking to customers and partners is the length of these questionnaires has gotten longer. The longest one that I've seen, and it's not normal, was about 300 pages, which is astronomical if you think about the time that it takes to put that in. But it is not uncommon for the questionnaire, and that's just for people that maybe haven't filled it out. That is the baseline set of questions that a carrier wants you to answer to understand your environment and give you a policy, to underwrite your policy. So kind of the average I see is in the tens, 20, 30 is not uncommon. And if you think about that from both a customer and a partner perspective, like I said at the beginning, if you are the one as a partner that knows the most about the environment, your customer is going to come to you naturally and say, can you fill this out for me? On that side, what that means is oftentimes you're putting time into that, and a non-insignificant amount of time. And it's pretty split whether or not partners are charging for that. So, time and materials to just fill out the questionnaire. I would say the majority of partners are not. So that means you've got unbillable hours that you're putting into filling out a questionnaire that is lengthy and arduous. And it's not just that it's long, but when you think about all of the questions being asked, you also have to understand that the answers that you give have a direct impact on when you make a claim. They're going to audit that kind of stuff. So you have to have a deep, unerring understanding of the answers that you give and the questions being asked, because we've seen carriers that will go back to a policy and challenge that, maybe you've got MFA on all your remote desktop sessions or something, and they'll actually have grounds to not pay out on a policy. And it's not that they're necessarily looking for that, but it's that in that questionnaire, you have to answer truthfully. And there's so many questions that it can be difficult to get your arms around that. So it's kind of like this time and the burden of the worry of, do you understand adequately what's being asked? What's the spirit of the question? Why it's getting asked? And so that's why, Sally and I are huge fans of some of these forward-thinking carriers that are doing some new and interesting things, trying to reduce down the length of the questionnaires, the complexity of the questionnaires. The carrier gets a better understanding, I guess, of risk. And you as a partner or a customer are not burdened with such kind of a laborious process to get underwritten.
Let's move to segment 3. Optimize your cyber defenses with Sophos. How does Sophos MDR enable organizations to optimize their insurance position?
So we were talking before about, the risky side of things and how insurers are looking for those less risky clients. They want to minimize their chance of having to make a big payout on an expensive claim. And increasingly, they recognize that Sophos MDR, our managed detection and response service, is a fantastic way to reduce the risk of your clients having a major cyber incident and then needing to make a claim. We've got 24/7 monitoring delivered by over 500 professionals, and that really elevates the cyber defenses of organizations of all sizes. And insurers are kind of increasingly going, yes, having that monitoring, that's a key difference in terms of whether an organization is going to have an incident that results in a claim, or they're able to stop an attack and minimize the impact on the organization. So it's a win for them. In fact, I've had conversations with one of the leading US insurers who described MDR users as their tier 1 customers. They're the customers they most want to have because they've got the best defenses. So they're the ones that are least likely to make a claim. And we're hearing from our MSPs as well that, Sophos customers, particularly those that are using our MDR service, are already seeing benefits when it comes to acquiring cyber insurance. Chris, maybe you could talk through some of the partnerships we got in place.
One of the partnerships that we've got that we're really excited about is through a company called Measured Insurance. And they do something very similar where they will hook into our customers at Sophos, the Sophos Central instance, and look at the overall configuration and policy of an organization. And based on that, they'll offer, something like a 25% discount on a premium for, cyber insurance to that customer. So that is a really interesting, I think you're taking some of the use cases in other insurance industries and kind of segments and pushing it down to cyber. That's one we're really excited about because as a measured consumer, you're going through them for insurance and you're a Sophos customer. Just by virtue of hooking up an API, you can get a pretty significant discount. So that's one really interesting. I think we're seeing more carriers kind of trying to quantify risk that way. And then another one that we're really excited about that's doing it a little differently is a company called Cysurance. And they have looked more at, if you're an MDR customer, specifically through Sophos, the risk that you have of getting hit with, like a big incident that requires executing your cyber policy is so reduced, they're actually publishing premiums and limits. So a set premium and a set limit, which for anybody that's actually done insurance shopping, even if you go do this for car insurance or home insurance, it's unheard of. But you can look at, I want this limit, here's my set premium, if I've got Sophos and a couple of other controls that are pretty standard in the industry. So Cysurance is really interesting for us because now as an end user, now as a partner that's trying to help your customers walk through this risk reduction strategy, you can quantify the value, right? We've seen customers actually have such a reduction in policy premium through going to Cysurance for their insurance policy that they're able to fund some of these other security programs or initiatives that they otherwise haven't been able to, including the full purchase of Sophos MDR. So it's really interesting when you look at the forward-thinking carriers that are really trying to get their arms around not just asking for attestation of what your controls are, but trying to help guide you through the process to say, here are unequivocally the things that make you a less risky customer so we can have a better partnership. And what that means is you get a better rate, a better limit, and that kind of stuff that comes out. Sally, I know we talked to a lot of carriers, we talked to a lot of people. We see trends moving that direction, but those are two specifically that we wanted to call out that I think are particularly indicative of kind of the shift in the insurance industry.
Speaking of those partnerships, what's the impact of these partnerships for Sophos customers?
Well, actually, I think it's an impact for Sophos customers and for partners. We're hearing some really considerable savings that customers are making on their cyber insurance policies from taking advantage of these partnerships. Just last month, there was a customer in California. They were able to cut their premium from $50,000 to $15,000. So a massive saving. And to Chris's point, that's budget that can be put into cyber defense improvements. So that's great. And that's a great conversation for partners to be having with their customers. It's creating that really nice virtuous circle. Chris was talking before about the holistic approach to cyber risk reduction, and that's what it's really delivering. But I think also, it's helping partners, with Cysurance, they take away that attestation, those long forms. So that's a whole load of work, a whole load of, frankly, stress. Have I done the form correctly? Have I got everything appropriately represented? That goes away. And so we're hearing some really great feedback from our partners on that side of things. Now, I think we probably should say, obviously we're a cybersecurity specialist. We can't give any advice or recommendations on cyber insurance. If you're interested, take a look at the insurance partnerships and work with insurance brokers as well on that.
Getting insurance for yourself as an MSP is also kind of a challenge because the risk you have managing other organizations is different. If you look at something like the Kaseya event a couple of years ago on the 4th of July, the impact of, your nightmare scenario where you get compromised and then your customers get compromised, that amounts to a significantly different risk profile for an insurance carrier than your customer that's a single estate. So it's really interesting looking at some of these partnerships. We're asking, what are the implications? Cysurance is a one that I think partners should look at because they actually offer dedicated MSP insurance with similar kinds of reduced attestation or questionnaire requirements. So when we talk about reducing the time and the worry and the burden to get these kinds of things, I think if you can remove the unbillable hours or even the time suck that sometimes filling out these questionnaires are for your customers and get them better security controls and a more robust security program and risk reduction strategy, but then you're able to do the same thing for your business, it's just kind of benefiting all around. And it's, I think, a really interesting play on where security and insurance are really starting to become more collaborative and where the partner community should really take advantage, because I think there's an opportunity to be much more consultative, to kind of brag about that even to your customers that here's our risk reduction and we do this internally. So we think you should do the same because, having good protection in place is one side of the coin, but having the ability and knowing how to recover, which is where insurance comes in, is the other side of that coin. And sometimes it just takes understanding that there are partnerships with tooling and, vendors that you trust that you can take advantage of to make this a lot easier and reduce that burden for you. I think that's, for me, the TLDR on what's the impact is let's make it easier and better kind of all around for customers and partners.
That's a great point, Chris. And also, the fact that, as a partner, you're able to help your customers get insurance coverage that is saving them thousands of dollars. Well, it's a great reflection of the value that you're bringing to their organization. It's a great reflection of the quality of advice that you're providing, and really helps reinforce the benefit of the partnership overall, I think.
You've both shared some really great information. and a lot for us to think about. Sally, where can we learn more about how to elevate cyber defenses with Sophos?
If you're not already working with Sophos MDR, we would love for you to add it to your security portfolio. If you're already a Sophos partner, it's a really easy add-on. And if you're not yet a partner, we'd love to welcome you. Sophos MDR is already the most widely used and highest rated MDR service in North America. And it secures more customers of MSPs than any other provider. And if for us, really the cherry on the cake, we were truly honored last month when Sophos MDR was named Product of the Year by CRN, recognizing our leadership for revenue and profit. So it's a really great proposition for MSPs. We'd love to talk to you about it. Please reach out to our team. We would love to talk to you about the different ways that you can incorporate it into your services that you provide to your customers.
Sally and Chris, thank you so much for joining me here today. And thank you at home for watching. For the Channel Company, I'm Kenna Johnson.